When you look at the way we use different types of vehicles, there's a strong argument that urban delivery vans have the most to gain from electrification. But electric vehicles are expensive, right? And that's what makes fleet managers choke on their cornflakes every morning. But they are getting cheaper. The Chinese are leading the charge. And here is the new king of the kids of the discount vans. This is called the Cavan, and the model is the C1. It's the only model this brand has at the moment, and there's only one dealership in southeast Melbourne. But if this vehicle can gain any traction in the market, this could be the one that finally weans the urban delivery market off diesel. This is where the Cavan C1 really shines. With a launch price tag of $47,990 drive away for this version, the C1 Plus, the Cavan is the new category killer in purely electric delivery vans. There's also the taller high roof C1 Max at $48,990 drive away, and the real cheapie, the C1 with its smaller battery and range, but a price tag of just $44,990 drive away. You also get a decent amount of kit for that, including LED lighting, steering wheel buttons, 2 info screens including a large centre unit, climate control, selectable drive modes, digital radio and plenty more. Giveaways that this is a budget van, however, exist in the form of the cloth front seats, single zone climate control and steel wheels with plastic hubcaps. For the full rundown, check out the written review at carsguide.com.au. Let's talk design, because the design of the Cavan C1 is notable. Now, you might think they've saved a bunch of money just by opening a new packet of straight lines, but think about it some more. The idea of a delivery van is to carry things around, like you put them in a box. So it's shaped like a box. Makes sense, can't really complain about that. Okay, so let's say you're a courier driver and this is your life for the next 8 hours, so it better work, right? Okay, this car kind of talks the talk. I'm not 100% sure it walks the walk. Yes, it has steering wheel controls, but when you get down to it, very little business is conducted through those. Just about everything is on this front screen, and it's very menu driven. It's not entirely, logical to someone like me. Let's just say that. There are plenty of air vents, but there's lots of hard plastic. And I don't think anyone from Lexus is going to be too worried about the fit and finish of this car. Even that looks like soft touch surface is actually hard. Okay. But there are 3 seats. That's great, because you often do carry a third person, and that third person gets a proper seatbelt. Good news. Also, some of the controls, because Photon is it's a partner company to Cavan, and they have a tie-up with Mercedes-Benz. So a lot of these climate controls and wand stalks will look very familiar if you've been in a C-Class or an E-Class Benz, because they're lifted straight from those. That's nice too. But then there's crazy stuff like the cup holders. Now, every time you take your cup out of it, it slams shut like a prison door. So you've got to go through the process of opening it up again just to get your cup back in it. I don't understand that. One little clip would have fixed it, but no, apparently not. Also, because there's no hole in the cargo barrier and there's no rear windows, there's no need for an interior mirror. So, how do you fix your makeup? Well, not my problem. But there's no mirrors on either of the visors either. So, you're stuck. There's no interior mirror. Overall, it does work, but it doesn't work as well as a lot of newer vehicles. In fact, things like there's no dash top storage space and no overhead storage space. They're all gimmies in modern delivery vans, and this isn't there yet. On the practicality front, you do get 2 sliding side doors, which is great. A lot of people charge extra for the second door, but it makes unloading and loading at the front a hell of a lot easier. There's a couple of LED lights. The roof is lined, but the walls are only lined halfway up. There's a good solid cargo barrier and 8 really good low-mounted toe points, or hitch points, which work better than the ones halfway up the wall, trust me. My only complaint is that the floor is checker plate, and it's kind of slippery. It'd be much better with a non-slip rubber surface. But if all that's good, the back doors are a slightly different matter. So, the Cavan C1 has barn doors at the rear, and they're split 50-50. No problem with that. They open to there on the first lock mechanism. However, if you want to load it with a forklift, you can manipulate that little stay there and the door will swing right back. The problem is, if it's blowing a gale where you're doing that, this door is now free to swing. So, instead of putting a proper articulated hinge in, what Cavan has done is given you an hockey strap that secures the door back to the side of the van. That is Flintstones tech, and it's ergonomically pretty rugged, I reckon. The guys who use these trucks are not going to like that at all. Oh, and if you happen to be inside when the door's shut, Because there's no windows in the cargo barrier or the sides of the doors, it is darker in there than a Tarantino fight scene. If you haven't got a torch, you will never find the inner handle to get out, and there's only one of them. Keep your phone handy. In terms of what powers this car, it's pretty conservative really in terms of modern EVs. It's got the skateboard construction with the batteries under the floor. The rear springs are leaf springs for load carrying capacity, and there's a single electric motor with 125 kilowatts of power and 210 Newton meters of torque driving the front wheels. Nothing outrageous, but it does the job. The big compromise is that because there's no room under the floor, thanks to the battery pack, there's nowhere to put the spare tyre. So if you notice a big cardboard box in the luggage area, that's got the spare tyre in it. There's not even a mount inside. Apparently, Cavan are going to address that in the next model. Let's hope so. Cavan claims a range of 325 kilometres for the C1 Plus, but that's based on the laboratory test, not the real world. On our test drive, we covered the equivalent of a day's courier running in typical conditions and came up with a theoretical range of closer to 280 kilometres, or about 250 kilometres before range anxiety starts to bite. Since the people who are going to be driving this car are probably going to be driving it for a full 8-hour shift, how it drives and how comfortable it is pretty important too. So let's start with the seats. They're pretty firm in the cushion, but the driver's seat in this vehicle is a suspension seat, which is a nice touch at this price point. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to find a setting where I don't bottom it out on speed humps, and I'm not that big. I've set it for my weight and it still bottoms out. And then I set it for a person who's heavier than me and it bottomed out even more. So I don't know, maybe someone's fiddled with the knob, I don't know. The driving position though is okay, apart from the pedal placement. The front wheel arch on my side intrudes into the footwell a long way, so that means the accelerator pedal is pushed across very close to the brake pedal. It's kind of okay in a way because in eco mode, and it's several drive modes, but in eco mode, it's basically a one pedal car anyway because of the way the battery regenerates with braking. So that's okay. And you will drive it in eco mode, trust me, because to get it out of eco mode into either performance or auto, you've got to go through the settings every time you key on and off. It's kind of a drag. You'll just drive it in eco, and I don't perceive much of a difference in acceleration between the modes anyway. The other reason for that is, of course, that it's kind of an interesting car to get started. There's no keyless entry and start. You actually unlock it with the fob manually, and then it's ready to go. But if you walk away, it'll still be humming away there in sort of standby mode until you lock the door. So you've got to lock it when you leave it. Fair enough, I guess, but that could have ramifications for someone who's in and out of it a lot every day. The other big element in driver comfort, of course, is the ride quality. And it's not too bad, I got to say, despite the leaf springs, which are obviously designed to carry a load. And I think if you did put a few hundred kilograms in the cargo bay, it might be even more not so bad. It rides well, it steers naturally, believe it or not, and all in all, I got no grizzles with the way it actually conducts itself in a dynamic sense. Where this vehicle falls down, however, is in terms of the calibration of its driver assistance. If you are 1 kilometre over the posted limit, you start getting this alarm and flashing lights on the dashboard. And sometimes it's glitchy too. It'll pick up a 20k sign for a speed hump and presume that that's the speed limit, even though that's an advisory. Similarly, service roads that have a lower limit than the road you're on, it will spot that and tell you you're over the limit, even though you're not. Very annoying. The other driver assistance systems in this car that really annoy me, and it's not just this car, a lot of cars like this are the same, the lane keeping assistance and the driver attention monitor. Both of them think that I'm A, about to hit a tree, and B, asleep at the wheel. I'm not, okay? It should be just backed off a fraction. Look, I know it's hard to criticise for an electronic system that is trying to save your life at all costs, but trust me, there are more subtle ways to do that. And this car too makes me think that, we've come to a point where they've had enough time, the other manufacturers and the Chinese manufacturers have had enough time to look at how to get those systems right, and they still haven't done it, which makes me wonder if it's now time to concede that this is a cultural thing more than a technological thing. And if that's the case, it really needs a rethink at boardroom level. Here's where reality hits. While here in Australia we think side airbags are now a given, that's clearly not the case in other markets, and the C1 is proof of that. In fact, there's only a pair of front airbags, and for a lot of safety-oriented fleets such as councils and government bodies, that ain't going to cut it. There's lots of driver assistance gear included in the C1, but to be honest, the calibration of much of it is pretty poor. The lane keeping assistance and driver monitoring, for instance, are over eager to step in, and the glitchy traffic sign recognition means the C1 often thinks you're speeding even when you're not. Cavan really needs to do better here. Charging can be done off a DC fast charger, and Cavan claims the C1 can go from 20 to 80% charged in about 18 minutes. The Cavan uses the Type 2 CCS charging plug system. Disappointingly, there's no charge cable included to charge from a standard household power socket. In any case, as a fleet vehicle, charging is much more likely to take place back at HQ on a wallbox charger. Commercial vehicles don't tend to have the same long warranties as passenger cars, and the C1 is no exception, with a 3-year, 100,000 kilometre warranty on the basic vehicle. But there's 5 years and 200,000 kilometres of cover for the EV electronics, and 8 years and 400,000 kilometres of cover for the EV battery itself. You also get 3 years of roadside assistance and 3 years of free servicing thrown in. I don't want to get all socio-economic about this, but this vehicle does remind me a little bit of the old days and the blue-collar, white-collar thing, where the people who decided to buy the vehicle were not the same guys who had to live with it and drive it for 8 hours a day on a normal shift. Will this vehicle do the job? Absolutely it will. But is the reduced cost enough to make up for the somewhat compromised ergonomics, comfort and drivability? Well, I reckon I can tell you exactly how most fleet managers will answer that. So look out for more of these in days to come.